if you start from a position of self-awareness, right, and you understand what your skills are, what value you bring to the organization, and marry that with what the organization is seeking to accomplish,
Right.
it creates a natural path for you to talk about what you're doing, the accomplishments that you have in the context of what the organization's strategic goals are.
I love that.
And
Welcome to the Promoted Podcast. I'm your host, Denise Harris, and today we're speaking to Jackie Hilton, Chief People and Culture Officer at ANA Enterprise. Welcome, Jackie.
hi, Denise, welcome, and thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I mean, you and I know each other, and we've known about each other's careers for a long time, so it really is great to have you as a guest on the show.
Well, I am really excited to be here as someone who has spent her entire career in human resources in the human resources field. This is an important topic to me. It's one that's close to my heart. And I hope that the conversation that we have today will give some insights and some inspiration to your listeners.
Oh, I'm sure that it will. Absolutely. So, Jackie, tell us a little bit about you and how you landed at ANA Enterprise.
Yes. So as I said, I've been in human resources for my entire career for 30 plus years. I started in HR. I moved my way up the ranks. I've been a bit industry agnostic.
Okay.
So I've moved through different industries. I've done, for profit and not for profit and public and private, but all within the HR field. And so when I started at ANA, 5 years ago, actually, I started as the head of human resources. I was a vice president at the time. And, went in doing, typical human resources accountabilities. And little bit by little bit, I had other functional areas moved under me, internal communications and then business services. And we had a new CEO come in who took a look at the organization and where she was trying to go with the future. And she said this role really should be elevated. And that she created the Chief People and Culture Office and asked me to assume that role.
Wow, that's really interesting. Can you talk a little bit about what does a chief people and culture officer do? And how did you make that leap? Because you hadn't been at A&A Enterprise for a long time. And as you mentioned, you actually went from senior VP to this role. So that was a promotion.
Yes.
And congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So, as I think about my time at ANA, as I said, some of this growth was iterative. I
Okay.
went in and my scope was purely human resources. I was making my way with that. They asked me to take on internal communications. I took on internal communications. I was asked to take on business services. And having the three functional areas under me is what led to the promotion to senior vice president. And so when um, the CEO created the People and Culture Office, it really was designed to encompass all of the functional areas that I had. She also wanted a special emphasis on um, diversity and inclusion and on workforce planning, both internal and external to the organization. So as I think about the chief people and culture role, the scope of this role is much bigger than my SVP role in that it is both internal and external. My prior role was very much internally focused, and this role requires me to focus externally as well.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you are in these organizations and there are these types of opportunities, a lot of us don't necessarily know how to position ourselves, for a promotion like that. I mean, we don't really know how to toot our own horn. We're feeling like maybe we're bragging about ourselves. What are your thoughts in terms of like how do we demonstrate our capabilities when we are in the office environment, and particularly today when it's kind of a remote, or it may even be hybrid, and you don't get to make those kinds of connections that you might ordinarily would if you were in a face-to-face in-person environment.
Right. So, it's interesting because um we all know people who run around tooting their own horn, right?
Yes.
We don't wanna be that person. But if you start from a position of self-awareness, right? And you understand what your skills are, what value you bring to the organization, and marry that with what the organization is seeking to accomplish,
Right.
it creates a natural path for you to talk about what you're doing, the accomplishments that you have, the accomplishment that your team has in the context of what the organization's strategic goals are.
I love that.
And yeah, and again, it doesn't come across as, braggadocious or,
Yeah.
just constantly tooting your own horn. You're a part of the narrative within the organization in terms of where the organization's trying to go.
Yeah. And I think also, using the opportunities when you're in front of your own leader to keep them up to date and abreast of, what the major projects are that you're working on, what success you've had, how you've moved the needle. I mean, many of us just kind of talk about that conversationally without realizing that we need to be able to expose the skills that we have. And also when we come into an organization and we just don't add value, but instead we're able to create value.
Yes. And, you think about it, um, part of leadership, right? The kind of the core of these leadership jobs is being able to get challenging things done despite the obstacles.
Right.
And if you just do it and you make your way from Monday to Tuesday and Tuesday to Wednesday and you never highlight those things, then they may well go unnoticed.
Yeah.
And you do want them to be noticed, and you want them to be noticed in the context, of how you're helping the organization thrive, and like you said, the value you're bringing, the value you're creating, and having that consistent narrative. People sometimes struggle with, asking for that promotion or asking for that pay increase, but when you have that consistent narrative and you're consistently showing how you are contributing and delivering value to the organization, that becomes just another natural conversation that you're having with your leader, that you're having within the organization.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. And I think it leads me to think also about sponsorship and mentorship, right? I mean, that does play a big role in career growth, having someone out there who's mentoring you or who is a sponsor so that when you're not in the room, you're being talked about. What are your thoughts regarding mentors and sponsors, and are they important, particularly when you get to the more senior levels?
Absolutely. I think mentors and sponsors are critical no matter what career stage you're at. And we often think about more junior employees needing mentors or needing sponsors as they're trying to climb the corporate ladder, if you will. And sometimes people take on this notion that once you're in a senior level role, a chief role, like what do you need a mentor for? You're at the pinnacle of your career. You don't need a mentor. You become
Right.
a mentor, right? And I do think it is important to become a mentor to others, But it is also critically important that you still have mentors and that you still have sponsors yourself. And if you think about it, mentors are those people who um, they have experience in something that you might have lesser experience in. They can
Okay.
give you advice or counsel about how to navigate a particular situation. And so you should always keep those lines of communication open. You should always have people in your network,
Yeah.
who can help you through that. And
Mhm.
then, as you said, the, sponsorship piece is, um, that's more of an active sport, right?
Okay.
Because that's the person that's gonna, not just sit behind the curtain and talk with you and, help you, grow and develop in private. That's the person who, as you said, is going to speak about you and speak about your capabilities, oftentimes in rooms that you're not in.
Yes.
Oftentimes in, situations where you might not otherwise have the opportunity, to talk about what you do or, the accomplishments that you've had. There are people that speak on your behalf.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of it is about representation. And what about leadership presence, executive presence? How much does that play into, getting a promotion or positioning yourself for, larger, more visible opportunities? We hear that term often, executive presence or leadership presence. You need to work on it. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, again, I think executive presence is also critical. And again, lots of different definitions of what that mean. Um, less so in our current environment, which
Mhm.
tends to be a little bit more casual, right? But people used to put a lot of emphasis in kind of what you wear and those kinds of things. And while that is still important, how you show up is still important. This whole notion of being able, to articulate your views, to think strategically, and
Right.
convey that to others. The ability to inspire confidence
Mhm.
both in your teams as well as, those who are looking at you for potential, more significant areas of responsibility. Leadership presence feeds all of that. It
Yeah.
feeds all of that.
Yeah. And, I think the other thing too, Jackie, is that, there's something to be said about making the shift from sort of the manager, director type positions where a lot of it is around, depending on the organization, of course, but around arranging, like doing things, making sure things happen, kind of you're the gatekeeper of the gates and the dates, if you will. But as you start to get a little bit higher into many of these roles, it really requires that you shift to becoming much more visionary, right? I mean, much more able to communicate in a way that is strategic, much more able to make decisions and be accountable for that. And it sort of shifts away from the doing and I think becomes more around the being. Would you think that that's have you seen that to be true?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, even as I think about my role, right? So I was in a senior leadership role prior to this one, and that role required me to, think strategically, to lead multiple functional areas, right? I had teams of people reporting in who are accountable for that day to day and the doing and the moving, the work forward, right? And you're really leading that effort. And then when I think about my current role, right, it's another turn in the leadership pipeline because now I shift from, leading various business functions to how I leverage those business functions to shape the strategic path of the enterprise. right? And
Mhm.
so again, as you continue to progress in your career, you have to think about, what are those skills and what are those competencies that this role requires that's different
Mm.
than what your previous role may have required. So even though I was coming out of a leadership role, a senior vice president role, this role requires me to think differently and to be different, to show up differently than my prior senior leadership role did.
Yeah. It's almost as if you're at an inflection point when you transition from one role to the next. I'm curious, Jackie, is there any, any advice or any lessons that you have learned or advice that you would have given yourself maybe 15 years ago, before you started to, I mean, you said you've been in human resources for a long time, but getting into some of these really high level positions for larger corporations, what would you have told yourself 15 years ago?
So when you start out in your career, you get all this advice about working hard.
Right.
Um, and what you learn as you start to progress in your career is that it's not only about working hard, right? Working hard is important, delivering results is important, working hard and delivering results in the right places, in the right areas
Okay.
is important, because again, you can work hard and you can post scores on things that are not moving the strategic agenda forward, and you're just gonna work hard and you collect your paycheck at the end of 2 weeks, and that'll be that.
Yeah.
Well, when you are, working on those things, working in those areas that are really moving the needle for the organization, that are really delivering or creating value for the organization, those are the things that get you noticed.
Yeah.
Those are the things that make people, kinda perk up and say, "Oh, well, wait a minute, she did that." And it opens up opportunities, for you to A, in a very natural way, as we said before, talk about what you're doing in the context of how that is benefiting the organization, but it also opens up the opportunity for you to talk about what else you can do, right? What else you can bring to the
The
table,
potential, right? I
the
mean, the
potential.
potential
And
for opportunity that you can often create for yourself.
yes, yes, and it opens up new pathways.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the do's and don'ts that someone should do in their first 60 days when they get promoted?
So one of the things that I think people don't do enough is pause.
Pause. Okay.
Pause and think about what is different about this role versus the
Yes.
role that I came from, right? What do I need to continue doing? What do I need to stop doing,
Mm.
right? What do I need to delegate? And to whom do I delegate?
Yes, that's a big one because we don't often delegate very well. I mean, we tend to want to keep things close to the chest. So thanks for raising that the ability to delegate to others. Okay, what else? I'm
Yes.
listening closely.
I think about, in that pause and thinking about, what do I need to do? What's your goal? What goals were given to you by the organization, goals and targets? What are the goals for yourself, right? That you want to set and really sit with that and know what they are so that when you step into it and things are busy and the email is dinging and the phone is ringing off the hook,
Yeah.
you know what your true north is and you know what you're trying to accomplish, you know what vision you're trying to set for your team
Yeah.
and how you're going to get your team aligned around whatever it is that you're setting out to do. But a lot of people don't pause. They just jump into the new role and they start doing
Yeah.
without really thinking about, what's the roadmap and what path am I really on? And, kind of where are my milestones? How am I going to know that I'm on the right path? I think a lot of times, especially if you're getting promoted within your own organization, you also have to pause and think about the relationships that you have with others within the
Oh, yes. Yes.
right? And
Yes.
how that
Especially
might need
when
to
you
shift.
go from being everyone's peer to then becoming their boss. That's a
Right.
big shift.
Right, from peer to boss, or, you were once peers and now you're sitting at a different organizational level, right? And so there are dynamics of the relationship that need to shift. If you don't stop and think about that, you keep doing what you've always done, and that may not serve you well.
Yeah. So those are some of the do's, right? I mean, taking a pause, thinking about the direction that you want to head in, really identifying, some of the goals that you have. And I would also add, thinking about the early wins. But what are some of the don'ts? What shouldn't we be doing when we get into a position that's different?
Hmm. So one thing I would say is, assuming that right?
Mm.
That um, take that moment to take that pause and to assess what's really going on. Because when you are observing from a different vantage point, things look one way. But when you are promoted, when you are elevated, when you now have, maybe access to information that you didn't have access to before,
Yes.
have, the ability to connect and dialogue with people that maybe you didn't have that open access to before. You don't want to jump in as if because you might not,
Yeah.
right? So start that listening tour again and
Mhm.
really, take that time to figure out, what really is transpiring here, and what might I glean from this vantage point that, maybe I couldn't see as clearly from where I sat before.
Yeah.
And
Jackie,
again,
you are dropping some gems. I mean, I hope folks have a pen and a piece of paper, or they're using their cell phone, to take notes, because these are really some gems. And I think they're going to help someone somewhere get that promotion that they're looking for. As we start to kind of land this plane, Jackie, you've been in human resources, as you said, for the majority of your career. What are three things that you look for when you are going to promote someone? I mean, you've got a lot of influence in this organization and in the organizations that you've worked at before. I mean, you're head of human resources, right? So, you've got a big say in that. What do you look for? What are some characteristics that you look for, that you identify when someone is trying to get promoted?
yeah. So, couple of things. So first, the table stakes is you've got to be doing well in your own in the place that you're in,
Okay,
right?
that's the basics, right? I
That's
mean,
the basics. You
absolutely.
gotta be doing well in the place that you're in, have a strong track record of performance and delivering results, because it's kind of hard to convince somebody to promote you to a position of greater responsibility when you're struggling to, manage what you've got. So
I get it.
that's just table stakes. The other thing that I think is really critical, especially as you're moving up in leadership roles, is I'm going to lump two things together. I'm going to call it emotional intelligence and relationships.
Okay.
Right? Um,
Emotional intelligence and
and
relationships.
relationships. And that becomes so much more critical, kind of the higher up you go, because that becomes your currency, right? Being able to get people aligned behind a vision, being able to convene the people that you need to convene to move something forward, right? All of that is relationship based. As you're trying to work through, issues within the organization or move key initiatives forward, you've got to be able to read a room. You've got to be able to understand the political landscape. You've got to be able to navigate, maybe what's being said, but moreover what's not being said in a room, right? So those relationships and that, emotional intelligence, being able to self-regulate, right? When you're in a difficult
That's
situation.
a big one.
Yeah.
Self-regulation, manage yourself. Absolutely.
Yes, when you're in a challenging situation, can you, in the moment, take that deep breath and, not lose your cool, and right? Because when you lose your cool, it costs you, right? There's a currency to that.
Yeah.
And so, that is something else, that I particularly look at as I'm looking at people moving up in the organization. And then you asked me for three. I think the third thing that I would throw in there, um, is is being willing to embrace change and opportunity.
Wow.
Um,
Especially today.
Especially today, right? Things move fast, things move furiously, and you've got to be able to assess what's happening quickly and to decide, kind of how you play in that space, right? Assess the risk. It's almost like, you got to be able to do that mental SWOT, right? You know, you might not have 6 to 8 weeks to sit down and map that out, pull it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be able to work it through in your mind and do that quick mental SWOT, and not be afraid to step out there and embrace that change. Take advantage of the opportunities that are out there, be able to create that vision and bring other people along, right? It's those kinds of skills, that really, I think, set, those spectacular leaders, of
Yeah. The ones who stand out, the
the ones
ones who are
who stand out.
memorable, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Those, you know what? First of all, thank you for that. I was able to glean five. Here's what I heard in terms of being ready for promotion. I heard that you have to be doing well in the place that you're already in, having a strong record. I heard you say that you have to have strong emotional intelligence and really become good or better at cultivating relationships because that's your currency. I also heard you say that you have to understand the political landscape. And I mean, we need to have a show just on that, right? I mean, understanding the political landscape because that's just so ripe with so many different layers. But okay, I digress.
Mhm.
Self regulation. And then I also heard you say, lastly, that, but certainly not least, be willing to embrace change and opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah.
You took copious notes.
Listen, I want to be able to help as many listeners as I can, and so when we're not on the show, these are some things that I have to remember to also share because they're just all so effective in terms of not just getting promoted, although that's what we're talking about, but also just in being able to show up in a way that says you're ready for whatever's next.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, with that said, thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you for coming on to the Promoted Podcast. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your wisdom. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please share this episode. I know you would have found it helpful. So, please, if you have, share this episode, and we will see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.